At Cedar Ridge Academy, Alex Thompson has always lived a life of privilege until a chance encounter with Mia Rivers, a quiet janitor with a hidden past, forces him to face a truth that shatters his world. As secrets unfold, Alex and Mia are thrust into a journey of redemption, forgiveness, and self-discovery that neither of them expected. Will Alex make amends for his past? And what will Mia do with the life-changing secret about her father's legacy? If you're curious to see how this story unfolds, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated on the next part. Don't forget to leave a comment below with your thoughts on Alex and Mia's journey so far. There's so much more to come. It was early autumn at Cedar Ridge Academy, and the air was crisp with the promise of change. The sprawling campus, an architectural marvel of colonial stone buildings and meticulously landscaped lawns, was the epitome of prestige. For Alex Thompson, a senior at Cedar Ridge, it was just another day in a life where everything seemed to fall neatly into place. His dark hair, perfectly styled, caught the morning light as he stepped out of the gleaming black Mercedes that had just pulled into the student parking lot. Alex adjusted the collar of his tailored school blazer, his eyes scanning the courtyard, already filled with other students. His gaze was automatic, more out of habit than curiosity. He didn't need to take in the details. He had lived this scene 1,000 times before. Cedar Ridge was an exclusive haven for the sons and daughters of society's elite, people like him whose families were known, respected, and more importantly, feared. As the son of David Thompson, one of New York City's most influential businessmen, Alex had always known his place. He was admired by his peers, his family's wealth elevating him to a status few could touch. The aura of privilege followed him wherever he went, like an invisible shield. He had grown up hearing stories about the business empires his father had helped build, though his actual understanding of those stories was vague. All he knew was that the Thompson name was synonymous with success, and Alex had never had a reason to question it. He was Cedar Ridge's golden boy, whether he liked it or not. And most days, Alex liked it just fine. His days were filled with luxuries others couldn't even dream of, his weekends occupied by elite social gatherings, yacht parties, and exclusive events that kept him at the center of attention. His close-knit circle of friends, Bradley Harris, Ethan Miller, and Lucas Carter, were cut from the same cloth. They too lived lives steeped in wealth, unaware or uninterested in the realities of those beyond their social bubble. This morning was no different. As he walked toward the main building, Bradley caught up to him, his usual smirk plastered across his face. Bradley's dirty blonde hair and chiseled jawline made him look like he belonged on the cover of a prep school catalog. He was Alex's best friend, and in many ways his mirror image. A boy born into wealth and never questioned about his place in the world. "Big game this weekend," Bradley said, nudging Alex in the ribs. "You ready?" Alex shrugged, but a grin tugged at the corners of his mouth. "Always am." Bradley chuckled, and they continued walking, exchanging casual greetings with passing classmates. They were popular after all, and being popular meant maintaining appearances. Even the teachers respected them, if only because of who their parents were. They could afford to break the rules every now and then. People like Alex and Bradley were never really punished, only mildly scolded. Meanwhile, on the opposite end of the social spectrum, Mia Rivers was finishing her morning shift in the East Wing. Mia, a petite young woman of 19, kept her head down as she wiped down the long wooden banisters that lined the school's grand staircases. She had been at Cedar Ridge for only 6 months, working as part of the janitorial staff to make ends meet. Her job was quiet, often solitary, and required her to remain invisible. That suited Mia just fine. Invisibility had become her survival mechanism. Mia's life had not been kind. After her father's unexpected death 3 years ago, everything had changed. What little financial stability they had collapsed almost overnight. Left with no family and no clear path forward, Mia had learned quickly that the world did not stop for grief. The bills had to be paid, food had to be bought, and survival had become her priority. At Cedar Ridge, she was a ghost to the students. Most days they swept past her without a second glance, their conversations bubbling with trivial worries about weekend plans, designer clothes, and the newest tech gadgets. In this world, Mia was the background, a small, barely noticeable fixture in their daily lives. But invisibility had its cost. Mia had overheard enough remarks from students like Alex and his friends to know exactly where she stood in their world. They didn't have to say much to make it clear. They saw her as beneath them. They saw all the workers at the school as nothing more than tools to keep their privileged lives running smoothly. Mia's heart ached when she thought about how different her life could have been. Before her father's death, they had been happy. Poor, but happy. Her father, Michael Rivers, had been a quiet, intelligent man who worked as an independent contractor. He had always told Mia that one day things would get better, that he was on the verge of something great. But that day never came. His sudden death had left Mia alone, without any real understanding of what he had been working toward. Now her days were spent cleaning up after people who would never know her name. Her nights were spent studying, hoping that one day she might be able to escape this cycle of survival. It was a life of exhaustion, both physical and emotional. As Mia finished cleaning the last banister, she wiped the sweat from her brow and glanced toward the courtyard where the students were gathering. She saw Alex Thompson laughing with Bradley Harris, his confident swagger unmistakable. Her stomach twisted with a mix of envy and disdain. She knew boys like Alex. They lived in a world that seemed untouchable, insulated from the struggles of everyday people like her. But Mia didn't linger on those thoughts. She didn't have time for resentment. There was too much work to be done. The first bell rang, signaling the start of the school day, and students began filing into their classes. Mia moved quickly through the corridors, cleaning up stray papers and straightening chairs before the next period began. She moved through the school like a shadow. Avoiding eye contact, her head was always down. As she turned the corner toward the west wing, her arms full of cleaning supplies, she suddenly collided with someone, the force knocking on the supplies from her hands. Cleaning rags, spray bottles, and a mop clattered to the floor, scattering across the marble tiles. Mia gasped, immediately dropping to her knees to gather her things. "I'm sorry, She looked up, freezing when she saw who she had bumped into. It was Alex Thompson, staring down at her with a mix of mild annoyance and amusement. His friends, Bradley and Lucas, stood on either side of him, both suppressing grins. "Watch where you're going," Alex said, his voice calm but condescending. He didn't bother to help her pick up the fallen items. "This is a school, not a dump." Mia felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. She quickly grabbed the fallen supplies, her hands trembling slightly. I'm sorry," she mumbled, avoiding his gaze. Bradley snorted. "Maybe next time, don't walk around like you're in your own little world, huh?" Alex chuckled, the sound cold and distant. "You know, Bradley, I think you're right. People should be more careful. After all, you don't get many chances when you're in her position." Mia's heart sank at the thinly veiled insult. She finished collecting her supplies and quickly stood up, her face burning. She muttered another apology before rushing down the hallway, her head bowed. Behind her she could hear the boys laughing, their voices fading as they continued down the corridor. She wanted to cry, but she forced the tears back, her throat tight. She had learned long ago that there was no use in showing weakness. In this world, no one cared. As the weeks passed, the divide between Alex and Mia became more pronounced. Alex and his friends treated the staff, especially Mia, with a casual cruelty that came from their deep sense of entitlement. It wasn't that they were overtly malicious. at least not in their own eyes. They simply didn't see people like Mia as equals. To them, she was a part of the school's infrastructure, no more important than the furniture or the landscaping. Bradley, always eager to impress Alex, often took the lead in making sarcastic remarks when Mia was nearby. Whether it was mocking her for being too slow to clean up after a spill in the cafeteria, or teasing her when she passed them in the hallway, it seemed to entertain the group to belittle her. One day during lunch, Alex and Bradley sat outside in the school's courtyard enjoying the warm autumn sun. They watched as Mia walked by, her head down as usual, pushing a cart filled with cleaning supplies. "Look who it is," Bradley muttered, nudging Alex. "You'd think she'd be quicker at this by now." Alex smirked, but this time something felt different. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but ever since the incident in the hallway, he'd felt a strange, nagging sensation whenever he saw Mia. It wasn't guilt exactly. Alex was too proud to admit to guilt, but it was something uncomfortable. He pushed the feeling aside, opting instead to play along with Bradley. "Maybe we should offer her some tips," he said, his tone light. "I'm sure cleaning floors isn't that complicated." Bradley laughed, loud enough for Mia to hear, but she didn't look up. She kept her gaze fixed on the ground, her shoulders tense. Alex watched her walk away, the uncomfortable feeling gnawing at the edges of his mind. Why did it bother him? Why couldn't he just let it go? He had mocked plenty of people before, students, staff, even teachers on occasion. So why did Mia get under his skin? For Mia, the mockery had become a constant hum in the background of her life at Cedar Ridge. She tried to ignore it, focusing on her work and her studies, but it was hard not to feel the sting of their words. She was no stranger to being judged based on her appearance, her job, or her circumstances. Growing up, people had always assumed things about her. Assumed she wasn't smart, assumed she wouldn't go anywhere in life. But she had never let those assumptions define her. Still, Cedar Ridge was different. Here the wealth gap between her and the students was so vast, it felt insurmountable. They lived in a world of privilege that Mia couldn't even begin to comprehend. And in their eyes, she was just another faceless worker, someone who cleaned up their messes and disappeared into the shadows. She tried to remind herself that it didn't matter. She didn't need their approval. She was here for one reason, to earn a paycheck and eventually to finish her education. She had plans. She had dreams. And no amount of teasing or cruelty would take that away from her. But some days, it was hard to keep those thoughts at the forefront of her mind. Some days, the weight of it all felt crushing. One afternoon, as the school day wound down and students were packing up to leave, Mia found herself in the school library, helping the librarian sort through a stack of textbooks that needed to be returned to the shelves. It was a quiet, peaceful task, and Mia appreciated solitude. The library was one of the few places where she could escape the noise and chaos of the school. She was carrying a particularly heavy stack of books toward one of the shelves when she felt her grip start to slip. Before she could react, the books tumbled from her arms, crashing to the floor with a loud thud that echoed through the otherwise silent room. Mia gasped, immediately kneeling down to pick up the scattered books. Her heart raced as she frantically tried to gather them before anyone noticed, but it was too late. Standing in the doorway, watching with an amused smirk, was Alex. "Nice going," he said, his voice laced with sarcasm. "You might want to work on your balancing skills." Mia flushed with embarrassment, her hands trembling as she grabbed the last book. "I'm sorry," she mumbled, her voice barely audible. Alex walked over to her, his expression unreadable. For a moment, Mia thought he might actually help her, but instead, he bent down just far enough to look her in the eye. "You know," he said slowly, "people like you don't get many chances. You should be more careful." One mistake, and it could cost you everything. Mia froze, his words stinging like a slap. She had heard comments like that before, but coming from Alex, they cut deeper. She didn't know why. Maybe it was because she had seen glimpses of kindness in him, moments where he wasn't quite as cruel as the others. But those moments, she realized now, didn't mean anything. Alex straightened up, the smirk back on his face. "Stick to cleaning floors," he said lightly. "It's probably the only thing you're good at." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Mia kneeling on the floor, the weight of his words pressing down on her like a physical force. The incident in the library lingered in Mia's mind for days afterward. No matter how hard she tried to push it aside, Alex's words echoed in her thoughts. She hated that it affected her so much. She hated that his opinion mattered. But the truth was, it wasn't just about Alex. It was about everything. The way she was treated, the way she was constantly reminded of her place in this world. Mia had always prided herself on her resilience. She had survived her father's death, the years of financial struggle, the loneliness. She had built a life for herself, however small and fragile that life might be. But here, at Cedar Ridge, she felt like she was constantly being pushed back into a corner, her dignity chipped away piece by piece. And yet, she had no choice but to stay. The job was a lifeline, a way to support herself while she worked toward something better. She couldn't afford to lose it. So she kept her head down, avoided eye contact, and did her work in silence, even as the students mocked her. A few weeks after the incident in the library, something happened that would change everything. It was a Friday afternoon, and Mia was outside the school near the main gate, sweeping up leaves that had blown onto the path. The day was unusually warm for autumn, and Mia was sweating as she worked, the late afternoon sun beating down on her. As she swept away, she noticed a sleek black car pulling up to the gate, a familiar car. It was David Thompson's, Alex's father. Mia glanced up, surprised. It wasn't often that parents picked up their children at Cedar Ridge. Most students had drivers or took their own cars. But today, David Thompson himself had come to pick up Alex. Mia continued sweeping, keeping her head down as the car parked. But then something strange happened. David Thompson stepped out of the car, and for a moment, he froze. His eyes scanned the area, landing on Mia, and his expression shifted from casual indifference to something that looked almost like shock. Mia felt her heart skip a beat. She hadn't expected him to notice her, let alone stare at her like that. "Maria." David's voice was quiet, almost disbelieving. Mia looked up, her heart pounding in her chest. What did you say?" David took a step closer, his face pale. "Maria Rivers? Is that you?" Mia's mind raced. No one had called her that in years, not since her father died. I don't go by that name anymore," she stammered, her hands gripping the broom handle tightly. David's expression softened, and for a moment, he looked as though he might cry. "I can't believe it. I've been looking for you for years." Mia's breath caught in her throat. "Looking for me? Why?" David swallowed hard, his voice thick with emotion. "Your father, Michael, he was my best friend. We were business partners. He made me promise before he died that I'd take care of you. But after the accident, you disappeared. I couldn't find you." Mia felt the world tilt beneath her. Her father's business partner? She had never known the full details of her father's work. After his death, everything had fallen apart so quickly that she hadn't had time to process it all. "I didn't know," she whispered, her voice shaky. I thought my father had nothing left. I didn't know you were looking for me." David took another step closer, his face filled with regret. "Your father left a fortune behind for you, Maria. He had built something incredible, and he wanted you to have it. But when you disappeared, I didn't know where to find you. I've been searching ever since." Mia's heart pounded in her chest. A fortune? Her father had left her a fortune. She had spent the last few years scraping by, working odd jobs just to survive, and all along had there been a legacy waiting for her. Before Mia could respond, she heard footsteps approaching. She turned to see Alex walking toward them, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Dad? What's going on?" David glanced at Alex, then back at Mia. "Alex, this is Mia Rivers. Her father was Michael Rivers, my business partner. She's part of our family." Alex stared at Mia, his face a mask of shock. "Wait, what?" Mia's heart raced as she looked from David to Alex, the weight of the revelation crashing down on her like a tidal wave. Everything she thought she knew about her life had just been upended in a single moment, and the boy who had spent months mocking her, belittling her, was now standing in front of her, his entire world shaken. As Mia tried to process what David had just told her, memories of her father flooded her mind. Michael Rivers had always been a kind, quiet man, but he had worked tirelessly to provide for her. When she was younger, he would come home late at night, exhausted but determined. He had often spoken about big plans and a future where they wouldn't have to worry about money anymore. But Mia had never asked too many questions. She trusted him. But when he died, those plans died with him. Mia had been too young to fully understand the scope of his business or the fortune he had been building. All she knew was that, after his death, everything had fallen apart. Bills piled up, and creditors came knocking. Mia had been forced to leave their home and fend for herself. She had assumed that whatever her father had been working on had failed. She never imagined that he had succeeded, that he had left something behind for her. And she certainly never imagined that David Thompson had been searching for her all these years. David stood before her now, his expression filled with regret. "I tried to find you, Maria. I really did. But after the accident, everything was chaos. I thought you had moved away, that you were living with relatives, but no one seemed to know where you had gone." Mia shook her head, still struggling to comprehend it all. "I didn't know. I thought I was alone." David placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice soft. "You're not alone. You never were. Your father wanted to make sure you were taken care of, and I failed him by not finding you sooner." Mia's chest tightened with emotion. It was too much, too fast. The idea that her father had left her a fortune, that David Thompson had been looking for her, that she had a place in this world she had never even known existed, was overwhelming. "I don't know what to say," Mia whispered, her voice trembling. David smiled gently. "You don't have to say anything. Just know that you're part of our family now. You have a place with us, and we'll make things right." Mia nodded, though she wasn't sure what making things right would even look like. She had spent so long building a life for herself, struggling to survive. How could she reconcile that with this new reality? As David and Mia spoke, Alex stood off to the side, his mind racing. This girl, this janitor he had spent months mocking, was the daughter of his father's best friend. She was entitled to a portion of the wealth his family had built. He felt sick. He had treated her as if she were nothing, as if her only value was in the work she did cleaning the school, and now he was learning that she was far more important than he could have ever imagined. Alex looked at Mia, his stomach churning with guilt. She had endured so much, more than he could have ever known. And all this time he had been part of the problem, adding to her pain with his cruel words and dismissive attitude. The weight of his actions hit him like a punch to the gut, and for the first time in his life, Alex didn't know what to do. The warm afternoon breeze seemed to still as Alex stood, staring at his father and Mia, a whirlwind of disbelief and guilt tearing through him. It was impossible to process everything at once. Mia Rivers. The girl he had mocked relentlessly over the past few months was not just any cleaning worker. She was the daughter of his father's closest business partner, Michael Rivers. A name he had vaguely heard growing up, but never thought much of. David's words continued to echo in his head. Your father and I built this empire together. She's part of our family. How could he not have known? How could he, someone who prided himself on being observant, completely miss the significance of Mia Rivers? She had been right in front of him all along, enduring their cruelty while carrying a painful secret, one that tied her directly to the legacy he had always assumed was his alone. The silence stretched painfully between them. Mia stood with her hands clenched around the broom she'd been using only moments earlier, her face pale and her eyes wide with shock and confusion. For her, the revelation was just as earth-shattering. She had spent years believing her father had died with nothing, that her path in life was set, one of struggle, hard work, and isolation. But now, everything she thought she knew about her past was unraveling before her eyes. David turned toward his son, his expression a mixture of weariness and guilt. Alex, he said quietly, there's a lot I need to explain. Alex swallowed, his throat tight. He wasn't sure he was ready for the explanation, not after what he had just learned, but he could feel the weight of Mia's gaze, the confusion and pain she was feeling mirrored in her eyes. He had to know the truth. David led both Alex and Mia into a quiet corner of the school's garden. The air felt tense, heavy with unspoken emotions. They sat on a stone bench under the shade of an old oak tree, the distant sound of students leaving school a quiet hum in the background. For a long moment, no one spoke. Alex's mind was racing, Mia's heart pounding, and David seemed lost in his own regret. I met your father, Michael, about 25 years ago, David began, his voice distant as he recalled the past. We were both young men, ambitious and determined to make something of ourselves. We started with nothing, just two guys with big dreams and an idea. But we worked hard, and before we knew it, we had built something real, something valuable. Mia listened, her mind flashing back to the rare stories her father had told her when she was little. She'd always known he was a businessman, but he had never spoken much about the details. He was private, protective of his work. But now, hearing David talk about their partnership, Mia realizes just how much her father had kept hidden from her. Michael was the brains behind a lot of it, David continued. He had a way of seeing things differently, finding opportunities where others saw obstacles. By the time you were born, Mia, he had already secured a fortune that would ensure you'd never have to worry about money. But Michael was a humble man. He didn't live lavishly or talk about his wealth. He wanted you to grow up appreciating hard work, just like he did. Mia's chest tightened with emotion. Her father had been working tirelessly to her, building a future she never even knew about. And then, just like that, he was gone. David's face darkened as he reached the harder part of the story. But then came the accident. Michael was driving home late one night after a meeting when it happened. A drunk driver hit him. He died at the scene. Mia flinched, her heart aching at the thought. She remembered the night clearly. Her father never came home. She was 16, and everything she knew about stability shattered in that moment. After the funeral, David continued, his voice thick with regret, Michael's last wish was for me to make sure you were taken care of. He had left a significant inheritance for you, enough to secure your future. But in the chaos that followed his death, you disappeared. Mia's breath caught. I didn't disappear, she said softly, her voice shaky. I had to leave. We lost the house. There was no money left, at least that's what I thought. I didn't know who to turn to. David nodded, his eyes filled with remorse. "I should have found you, Mia. I tried. Believe me, I tried. But by the time I realized what had happened, you were gone. I hired private investigators, searched for years, but you'd left no trace. Until now." The weight of David's words settled over them like a heavy blanket, and Mia felt her throat tighten. So much of her life had been shaped by that one tragic event, and now to find out that things could have been different, her father had left something behind for her, it was almost too much to bear. For Alex, the revelation was equally overwhelming. His entire life he had grown up believing the Thompson family's wealth was built solely by his father's brilliance. But now, learning that Michael Rivers had been just as responsible for the empire they lived in, learning that Mia, the girl he had looked down on, was just as entitled to that wealth, was like a punch to the gut. His mind flashed back to all the times he and Bradley had mocked Mia, treating her like she was nothing. The guilt hit him like a wave, threatening to drown him. How could he have been so blind? How could he have treated her with such cruelty, not knowing who she really was? But as the weight of his guilt settled in, Alex realized something else. This wasn't just about Mia's hidden past or her rightful inheritance. It was about the way he had lived his life, assuming that his wealth, his privilege, made him better than others, assuming that people like Mia were beneath him. He had been wrong, so very wrong. David's voice broke through his thoughts, soft but filled with determination. "Mia, I want to make things right. Your father's fortune is still waiting for you. You're entitled to a significant portion of what we built together. It's yours, just as much as it is Alex's." Alex flinched at his father's words, the guilt twisting in his chest. He had always thought of his family's wealth as something that belonged to him, something that was his birthright. But now he saw it for what it really was, something built on the hard work and sacrifices of people like Michael Rivers, and something Mia was just as entitled to as he was. Mia's hands trembled as she tried to process everything David had told her. A fortune? An inheritance? It all seemed so unreal. She had spent the last few years scraping by, living paycheck to paycheck, never knowing that there was another life waiting for her. But even as the reality of her inheritance sank in, Mia felt conflicted. Yes, the money would change everything. It would give her the stability she had always longed for. But at what cost? Would she be stepping into a world she didn't belong in, a world that had always looked down on her? She glanced at Alex, who was sitting silently beside his father, his face pale and tense. She knew that he was struggling with his own guilt, but part of her still felt a twinge of anger. He had treated her with such disdain, never once considering that she might be more than the job she did. And now, suddenly, everything had changed. But Mia wasn't sure if she was ready to forgive him just yet. "I don't know," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can just step into this new life. It doesn't feel real." David nodded, his expression understanding. "You don't have to decide anything right now, Mia. Take your time. But just know that whatever you choose, you have a place with us. You're part of this family." Mia looked down at her hands, her mind spinning. Family. It was a word that had always carried so much weight, but one she had been without for so long. Now it seemed like she was being offered a chance to reclaim it. But at what cost? As the conversation came to a close, David left Mia with his contact information, promising to help her through the legal process of accessing her inheritance. Then, after a long, awkward silence, the meeting ended. Mia quietly excused herself, needing time to process everything. David gave her space, but Alex stood rooted to the spot, guilt gnawing at him. Mia hadn't looked at him again since the revelation. She didn't need to. He could feel the weight of his own shame pulling him down, suffocating him. After Mia disappeared down the garden path, Alex turned to his father, his throat tight with emotion. "Dad, I didn't know." David sighed, rubbing his hand across his brow. "I know, Alex, none of us knew, but now that you do, it's up to you to make things right." Alex nodded, though he wasn't sure how. The guilt weighed so heavily on him that he felt crushed beneath it. He had spent so long living in a world of privilege, completely oblivious to the struggles of those around him. Now, faced with the reality of what Mia had been through, and his own role in making her life harder, he wasn't sure he could ever make up for it. "I've been a horrible person, Dad," Alex admitted quietly, his voice thick with shame. "To her, to so many people." David placed a hand on his son's shoulder, his expression serious but not unkind. "You can't change the past, Alex, but you can change how you move forward. The question is, are you willing to do the work?" Alex swallowed hard, the weight of his father's words sinking in. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear. He couldn't go back to the person he had been. The revelation about her father's legacy and the wealth waiting for her should have been a dream come true. But for Mia, it felt more like a nightmare. She had spent the last few years living a life defined by struggle, scraping by odd jobs, doing what she could to survive. Now suddenly, the world that had rejected her was offering her a place at the table. But Mia wasn't sure if she wanted it. In the days following her meeting with David, Mia found herself filled with conflicting emotions. Part of her wanted to embrace the new opportunities, to step into the life her father had built for her. After all, wasn't this what she had always dreamed of? Stability, security, a future that didn't involve cleaning floors and living paycheck to paycheck. And yet, another part of her, the part that had fought so hard to survive, the part that had built a life out of the ashes of her past, was hesitant. Accepting her father's fortune felt like erasing the person she had become. Would she be betraying herself if she accepted the money? Would she lose her identity, her sense of independence? The questions swirled in her mind, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't find the answers. While Mia wrestled with her future, Alex was struggling with his past. The guilt that had settled in his chest the day he learned the truth about Mia hadn't gone away. In fact, it had only grown heavier with each passing day. At school, he couldn't escape the memories of how he had treated her. Every snide remark, every dismissive look, every moment where he had made her feel small. He couldn't understand how he had been so blind, how he had lived his life without ever considering the impact of his words and actions. And it wasn't just Mia. Alex had always been part of Cedar Ridge's elite crowd, surrounded by people like Bradley and Ethan, who shared his sense of entitlement. They had spent years living in a bubble, unaware or uncaring of the struggles faced by those outside their world. But now that bubble had burst and Alex was left feeling lost. One day, a few weeks after the revelation about Mia, Alex found himself sitting in the school courtyard with Bradley. It was lunchtime and the sun was shining, but Alex felt cold inside. He hadn't told Bradley about Mia. Not yet. He wasn't sure how to bring it up, and part of him was afraid of how Bradley would react. Bradley, as usual, was in high spirits. He was talking about the latest party he was planning to throw, going on about who he was inviting and what kind of music they should play. But Alex wasn't listening. His mind was elsewhere, his guilt gnawing at him. Finally, unable to hold it in any longer, Alex blurted out, "Brad, we need to talk." Bradley looked at him, surprised. "What's up, man? You've been acting weird lately." Alex took a deep breath, steeling himself from what he was about to say. "It's about Mia." Bradley snorted. "The janitor? Why are you still thinking about her?" Alex's stomach twisted with guilt and anger. "She's not just the janitor, Brad. Her father was Michael Rivers, my dad's business partner. She's part of the family's legacy." Bradley blinked, clearly confused. "Wait, what?" Alex's voice grew quieter, but more intense. Mia's entitled to a huge portion of the wealth my family has. She's been living as a janitor all this time, not knowing that she had a fortune waiting for her. And I've been treating her like garbage. Bradley frowned, leaning back in his chair. So what? She's still just a janitor. Who cares if her dad was rich? She's not like us, Alex. Alex felt a surge of anger rise in his chest. He had spent years thinking like Bradley, thinking that money and status made him better than everyone else. But now he knew how wrong that mindset was. "Brad, she deserves better than the way we've treated her," Alex said, his voice shaking slightly. "I deserve the guilt I feel. I've been a terrible person, and I don't want to be like that anymore." Bradley raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "What? Are you suddenly going soft on us? Come on, Alex, this is who we are. We don't owe her anything." Alex stared at Bradley, his anger boiling over. For the first time, he saw his friend for what he truly was: entitled, arrogant, and completely unwilling to change. "I don't want to be that person anymore," Alex said quietly. "I'm done." Bradley scoffed. "Fine, do what you want, but don't expect me to feel bad for some janitor." With that, Alex stood up and walked away, leaving behind not just Bradley, but the person he had once been. Later that day, Alex found Mia in the school's garden, where she often went to escape the noise and chaos of her life. She was sitting on a bench, her gaze fixed on the flowers in front of her, lost in thought. "Mia," Alex called out softly as he approached her. Mia looked up, surprised to see him, but she didn't say anything. She simply waited for him to speak. Alex swallowed hard, his heart pounding in his chest. He had rehearsed this conversation in his head a dozen times, but now that he was standing in front of her, the words felt inadequate. "I owe you an apology," he said finally, his voice thick with emotion, "for everything." Mia blinked, her expression unreadable. "Why now?" she asked quietly. "Why apologize now, after everything?" Alex hesitated, unsure of how to explain. Because I was blind. I didn't see you for who you really were. I was so wrapped up in my own world, my own privilege, that I never stopped to think about how my actions affected you. And I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for all the things I said, for the way I treated you. I was wrong, Mia. I was so wrong." Mia looked down at her hands, her silence stretching between them like a wall. For a long moment, Alex thought she might not respond at all, but then she spoke, her voice soft but firm. "You didn't know," she said, her eyes lifting to meet his. "But that doesn't excuse what you did. You hurt me, Alex. You and your friends. You made me feel like I was nothing." Alex's chest tightened with guilt. "I know," he whispered, "and I'll never forgive myself for that." Mia's gaze softened slightly, though her voice remained steady. "I don't need you to forgive yourself. I need you to learn from this. I need you to understand that people are more than what they seem on the surface." "I do," Alex said, his voice earnest. "I understand that now." They sat in silence for a while, both of them lost in their own thoughts. Alex knew that one apology couldn't undo the damage he had caused, but he hoped it was a start. Finally, Mia spoke again. "I don't know if I can forgive you right now, but I appreciate that you're trying." Alex nodded, understanding. He didn't deserve her forgiveness, not yet, but he was willing to work for it. The days following Alex's heartfelt apology were strange and uncomfortable. For both Alex and Mia, the school that had once been so familiar now felt foreign. Each passing day was filled with an awkward tension that neither of them knew how to navigate. Alex found himself constantly aware of Mia's presence, but not in the way he had before. Now, instead of dismissing her, his heart twisted with guilt every time he saw her. Every casual glance or exchange reminded him of the months he had spent belittling her, mocking her, treating her like she was nothing. He was ashamed of the person he had been, ashamed of the way he had used his privilege as a shield, and ashamed that he hadn't seen the damage he was causing sooner. The apology had been a start, but Alex knew it wasn't enough. It was easy to say the words, but far harder to prove he had changed. Mia, for her part, was still grappling with her own complex emotions. While she appreciated Alex's attempt to make amends, she couldn't simply forgive him overnight. The pain of his cruelty, coupled with the weight of her father's sudden legacy, had left her feeling raw and uncertain. One afternoon, after an exhausting day of work, Mia found herself alone in the school's quiet courtyard, the sunlight fading as the day turned to evening. The garden had become her sanctuary, a place where she could gather her thoughts and breathe in the calm that seemed so distant from the chaos of her life. It was here that Alex found her again. "Mia?" Alex's voice was hesitant as he approached her. Mia looked up from the flowers she had been absent-mindedly tending to. For a moment she didn't say anything. She wasn't sure she had the energy to deal with whatever Alex wanted to say now. She had enough on her plate. "What is it?" she asked quietly, her tone resigned more than confrontational. Alex shifted nervously, running a hand through his hair. I wanted to talk. "I know I apologized before, but I feel like I didn't say everything I needed to." Mia sighed, turning back to the flowers. "You don't have to keep apologizing, Alex." "No, I do," Alex insisted, his voice suddenly more firm. He stepped closer, sitting down on the bench next to her. "I need you to understand that I've been thinking about everything, about the way I treated you, about the way I've lived my life, and I know I need to change." Mia didn't look at him, but she could feel the sincerity in his voice. Still, she didn't respond right away. She wasn't ready to simply accept his words and move on. There was too much history between them, too much pain that couldn't be erased by a few well-meaning conversations. "I don't know what you want from me, Alex," she said finally, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "I appreciate that you're trying, but I'm not sure if I can just forgive and forget. I'm still dealing with a lot of things." Alex nodded, his expression softening. "I know. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. Honestly, I don't know if I deserve it. But I want to be better, Mia. I want to learn from this." Mia glanced at him, her gaze searching his face. "Why now? Why do you suddenly care so much?" Alex hesitated, unsure of how to answer. Part of him wanted to say it was because of the revelation about her father, that learning who she really was had shocked him into rethinking his entire life. But that wasn't the whole truth. Something deeper had shifted inside him, something he couldn't quite explain. "I guess," Alex began, his voice quieter now. "I guess I realized that the way I've been living isn't who I want to be. I've been so blind, Mia, so selfish. And now, seeing you, seeing everything you've been through, it made me realize how small my world has been. I don't want to be that person anymore." Mia stared at him for a long moment, her heart heavy with conflicting emotions. She could see that Alex was sincere, but sincerity didn't erase the months of cruelty she had endured. It didn't make the pain go away. But there was something else too, a part of her that wanted to believe him, that wanted to believe people could change. "I don't know if I can trust you yet," Mia admitted, her voice soft. "But I do believe you're trying." Alex nodded, relief washing over him. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. It was a start. "I'll prove it to you," he said, his voice steady. "I'll show you I'm serious." Mia didn't respond right away. She simply turned back to the flowers, her thoughts spinning as she tried to process everything. She didn't know what the future held, but for now, she was willing to wait and see if Alex could really live up to his words. That evening, as Alex walked home, he felt a sense of resolve settle over him. For the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to take responsibility for his actions. He wasn't just apologizing to ease his guilt. He was determined to become the person Mia could respect, not because of his wealth or status, but because of who he was inside. But words were easy. Actions were what mattered now. Alex decided to take a step back from his usual social circle, distancing himself from friends like Bradley, who still lived in the bubble of entitlement that Alex was beginning to see so clearly. It wasn't easy. Bradley had been his best friend for years, and walking away felt like abandoning a part of his old life. But Alex knew that if he was going to change, he couldn't continue surrounding himself with people who reinforced the worst parts of who he had been. Instead, he threw himself into the outreach programs at school. He started volunteering in after-school tutoring sessions for underprivileged students, working closely with the community service department to organize charity drives and fundraising events. At first, some of his classmates were confused by his sudden shift in priorities. They didn't understand why the son of one of the wealthiest men in the city would bother with things like tutoring or community service. But Alex didn't care what they thought. He wasn't doing this for them. He wasn't even doing it for himself. He was doing it for the people he had ignored for so long, for people like Mia, who deserved so much more than the world had given them. As the weeks passed, Alex found that the more time he spent helping others, the more his perspective shifted. He began to see the world in a way he never had before, through the eyes of those who struggled, those who had been overlooked and ignored by the privileged few. And slowly, bit by bit, Alex felt himself becoming the person he had always wanted to be. While Alex was working to transform himself, Mia was still struggling with the weight of her father's legacy. The inheritance that had been left to her felt like a burden, something she didn't deserve, something she didn't know how to handle. She had spent so long living in survival mode, scraping by with every paycheck, that the idea of having access to such wealth seemed foreign to her. David Thompson had been patient with her, giving her the time and space she needed to process everything. He had offered to help her navigate the legal process of accessing her inheritance, but Mia had been hesitant to take him up on it. She wasn't sure she wanted to step into that world, the world of wealth and privilege that had always seemed so distant from her own. One afternoon, David invited Mia to his office in the city to discuss the next steps. The office was sleek and modern, the kind of place Mia had never imagined herself being in. She sat across from David, feeling out of place in her simple clothes, while he explained the details of her father's estate. "There's no rush," David assured her, his voice kind. "But I want you to know that the money is yours, Mia. Your father wanted you to have it. You don't have to live like this anymore." Mia shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "I don't know what to do with it," she admitted, her voice quiet. "I've spent my whole life trying to make ends meet. I'm not sure I know how to live any other way." David smiled gently. "You don't have to change who you are, but this money can give you opportunities you never had before. You can use it to make a difference, to help others who are going through the same struggles you've faced." Mia considered his words. The idea of using her father's fortune to help others appealed to her, but she still wasn't sure if she was ready to accept it. It felt like stepping into a world she didn't belong in, a world that had always looked down on her. "I'll think about it," she said finally, her voice still hesitant. David nodded, understanding. "Take your time, Mia. Whatever you decide, we'll support you." While Mia wrestled with her inheritance, Alex found unexpected support from Jessica Miller, one of his classmates. Jessica had always been kind, but Alex had never really paid much attention to her before. She wasn't part of his usual crowd. She was quieter, more focused on her studies and community work. But now that Alex was spending more time on outreach programs, he found himself working alongside her more often. One afternoon, after a particularly successful tutoring session, Alex and Jessica walked out of the school together, the cool autumn air brushing against their faces. "I've noticed you've been really involved with the outreach programs lately," Jessica remarked, glancing over at him with a smile. "It's a good change." Alex shrugged, feeling a little self-conscious. "Yeah, I guess I just wanted to do something different, something meaningful." Jessica nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I think that's great. A lot of people don't realize how much they can do to help others. They get so wrapped up in their own lives that they forget the world is bigger than just them." Alex winced slightly, knowing that she was unintentionally describing his old self. "Yeah, I was one of those people." Jessica looked at him, surprised by his honesty. "Well, it's never too late to change." Alex smiled, grateful for her understanding. "Thanks, I'm trying." As they walked, Jessica offered him some advice. "Just make sure you're doing this for the right reasons, Alex. Don't do it just to feel better about yourself. Do it because you really care. People can tell the difference." Her words stuck with him. He knew she was right. He couldn't just use community service as a way to absolve his guilt. He had to genuinely care about the people he was helping. And the more time he spent with them, the more he realized that he did care. Not everyone was happy with the changes Alex had made in his life. Bradley, his former best friend, had noticed Alex's growing distance and was not pleased. He didn't understand why Alex had suddenly decided to care about things like tutoring and community service. To Bradley, it seemed like a betrayal of who they were, entitled, wealthy, and above everyone else. One afternoon, after a particularly awkward conversation in the cafeteria, Bradley cornered Alex in the hallway, his tense expression. "What's going on with you, man?" Bradley demanded, his voice laced with irritation. "You've been acting all weird lately, like you're too good for us or something." Alex sighed, already knowing where this was going. "I'm not too good for anyone, Brad. I'm trying to do better. I've made a lot of mistakes, and I'm trying to fix them." Bradley scoffed. "Fix them? You don't need to fix anything. We've got it good, Alex. We don't owe anyone anything." Alex's jaw tightened. This was the exact mindset he was trying to get away from, the belief that wealth and privilege made them superior to everyone else. It was toxic, and he couldn't be a part of it anymore. "I do owe people, Brad," Alex said, his voice firm. "I've hurt people. I've been selfish, and I don't want to be that person anymore." Bradley's expression darkened. "So what? You're just gonna ditch us? Spend all your time hanging out with those charity cases?" "They're not charity cases," Alex snapped, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "They're people. People who deserve just as much as we do." Bradley stared at him, clearly offended. "You've changed, man, and not in a good way." With that, Bradley turned and stormed off, leaving Alex standing alone in the hallway, his chest tight with a mix of anger and sadness. He hadn't wanted to lose his friends, but he couldn't keep living the way he had before. Sometimes, change comes with a price. Bradley's resentment didn't stop there. Fueled by jealousy and a sense of betrayal, he decided to take matters into his own hands. If Alex wanted to abandon their friendship for the sake of some misplaced sense of guilt, fine. But Bradley wasn't going to let him do it without consequences. He started spreading rumors around the school, whispers that Mia was only using Alex to get closer to his father's money. He painted her as a gold digger, someone who had manipulated the entire situation to her advantage. It didn't take long for the rumors to spread. Cedar Ridge had always been a place where gossip thrived, and soon enough the whispers grew louder. Mia began noticing the sideways glances, the hushed conversations that stopped as soon as she entered a room. It was subtle at first, but it quickly escalated. One day, as Mia was cleaning up in the cafeteria, she overheard a group of girls whispering near the window. "I heard she's been after Alex's dad for years," one girl said, her voice low but sharp. "Yeah, she probably just wants his money," another added with a snicker. Mia's heart sank. She had worked so hard to maintain her dignity, to prove that she was more than just her circumstances. But now it seemed like no matter what she did, people would always judge her. The rumors weighed heavily on Mia, and soon they became too much to ignore. One afternoon, after another particularly painful encounter, Mia found herself in the school's empty courtyard, tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. She had thought that things were finally starting to get better, that she was finally being seen for who she really was. But now it feels like she was back to square one. As she sat on the bench, lost in her thoughts, Alex appeared, his expression filled with concern. "Mia," he called out, approaching her slowly. "I heard about the rumors. I'm so sorry." Mia looked up at him, her face tight with frustration and sadness. "Why is this happening, Alex? Why can't people just leave me alone?" Alex sat down beside her, his heart aching at the sight of her pain. "It's Bradley," he admitted quietly. "He's upset that I've changed, and he's trying to sabotage everything. I'm so sorry, Mia. This is all my fault." Mia shook her head, her voice trembling. "It's not just Bradley, it's everyone. No matter what I do, people will always see me as less than them. I'll never belong here." Alex's chest tightened with guilt and frustration. He had spent so long contributing to the very system that was now tearing Mia down, and now, even as he tried to make things right, it felt like the damage had already been done, but he wasn't going to let it end like this. The next day, Alex made a decision. He wasn't going to let Bradley or anyone else continue to spread lies about Mia. He had hurt her enough already. He wasn't going to let her suffer anymore because of him. It was time to take a stand, not just for Mia, but for himself. That afternoon, during the school's weekly assembly, Alex asked the headmaster if he could address the students. It wasn't something he had ever done before, and he could feel his heart pounding in his chest as he stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces. But he knew this was the right thing to do. "Hey, everyone," Alex began, his voice a little shaky at first. "I know this isn't something I normally do, but I need to talk to you all about something important." The room fell silent as everyone turned their attention to him, curious but cautious. "There have been some rumors going around lately," Alex continued, his voice growing steadier. "Rumors about Mia Rivers. And I'm here to tell you that those rumors are lies." A murmur of surprise rippled through the crowd, but Alex pressed on. "Mia is one of the most hard-working, honest people I've ever met," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "And she's been through more than any of us can imagine. She doesn't deserve the way people have treated her. Not from me, not from anyone." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the students. "I've made a lot of mistakes. I've been selfish, arrogant, and blind to the struggles of others. But I'm trying to change, and part of that change is standing up for what's right. So I'm asking all of you to stop spreading lies about Mia. She deserves better." There was a moment of silence after Alex finished speaking, and for a brief second, he wondered if anyone would listen. But then, slowly, the room erupted in applause. It wasn't everyone, but it was enough. Mia, who had been sitting in the back of the room, felt a lump rise in her throat as she watched Alex defend her in front of the entire school. It wasn't something she had expected, but seeing him stand up for her, publicly in front of all their peers, made her realize just how much he had changed. For the first time in a long time, Mia felt like she wasn't alone. After the assembly, Alex found Mia waiting for him outside the auditorium. She was quiet, but her expression was softer than it had been in days. "Thank you," she said simply, her voice filled with emotion. Alex smiled, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. "I meant every word." They stood together in comfortable silence, the tension between them easing as they both realized that this was the beginning of something new, something better. "I think," Mia began slowly, her voice tentative, "I think I might finally be ready to accept my father's legacy, but only if I can use it to help others." Alex nodded, his heart swelling with pride. "You'll make a difference, Mia. I know you will." Mia smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "And maybe we can do it together." Alex's heart soared at the thought. "I'd like that." For the first time, Mia and Alex felt like they were truly moving forward, not just as individuals, but together. They had both grown, both learned from their mistakes, and now they were ready to face the future. Together, they would build something better. As the days passed after Alex's public stand for Mia, a shift began to ripple through Cedar Ridge Academy. The rumors that had once swirled around Mia like a dark cloud slowly began to fade. The students who had once whispered behind her back were now quiet, their curiosity about Alex's bold defense overriding their need to gossip. But despite the calmer atmosphere, Mia still felt the weight of everything that had happened. She carried it in her shoulders, in the way her heart clenched when she passed by the students who had judged her, and even in the way she looked at Alex, someone who had changed so much yet still represented the world that had hurt her. Forgiveness wasn't something that came easily, Mia realized. It wasn't something that could be given in a single conversation or a heartfelt apology. It was a process, a slow and often painful journey that involved not just the person seeking forgiveness, but the one offering it. Mia wanted to forgive Alex. She wanted to let go of the anger and resentment that had been festering in her heart for months. But a part of her still struggled to reconcile the boy who had hurt her with the boy who was now trying so hard to make things right. One afternoon, as Mia sat alone in the school's garden, she thought about the path she had taken to get here. She had always been strong. She had survived so much, endured so many challenges. But this was different. This required a kind of strength that went beyond survival. It required her to open her heart, to trust that people could change. "Mia," Alex's voice broke through her thoughts, soft but steady. Mia looked up to see Alex standing a few feet away, his hands tucked nervously into the pockets of his jacket. There was a tension in his posture, a quiet vulnerability that Mia had come to recognize over the past few weeks. He was no longer the arrogant, untouchable boy who had mocked her. He was different now, more humble, more aware. She gestured for him to sit beside her on the bench, and he did, the silence between them filled with unspoken words. "I know I've said it before," Alex began, his voice quiet, "but I'm really sorry for everything." Mia nodded, though she didn't respond immediately. Instead, she let the silence stretch between them, allowing herself to feel the weight of his words. It wasn't that she doubted his sincerity. She could see how much he had changed, how hard he was trying, but forgiveness wasn't just about him. It was about her, too. "I know you're sorry, Alex," Mia said finally, her voice calm but thoughtful. "And I know you've changed, but it's still hard for me. It's hard to let go of the hurt." Alex's expression softened and he nodded. "I understand. I don't expect you to just forget everything. I know it takes time." Mia looked at him, her eyes searching his face. She could see the guilt in his eyes, the way he carried the weight of his past actions. But more than that, she could see his determination to do better, to be better. And for the first time, she felt a flicker of something else. Hope. "I think," Mia said slowly, her voice steady, "that I'm ready to start forgiving you, but it's going to take time." Alex's relief was palpable, his shoulders relaxing slightly as he nodded. "I'll wait as long as you need," he said quietly. "I'm just glad you're willing to give me a chance." They sat together in silence for a while, the garden around them peaceful and still. For the first time in months, Mia felt a sense of calm settle over her. It wasn't a perfect resolution. There was still work to be done, still healing to take place. But it was a start, a new beginning. In the weeks that followed, Mia continued to reflect on her father's legacy and the future that awaited her. The inheritance that had once felt like a burden now seemed like an opportunity to build something meaningful, something that could help others the way she had always wanted to. David Thompson had been nothing but supportive, offering guidance and resources to help Mia navigate the complexities of her father's estate. He never pushed her, never pressured her to make a decision. Instead, he listened, offering advice when she asked for it, and giving her the space to figure out what she truly wanted. One afternoon, Mia sat in David's office, the sleek modern space, a stark contrast to the life she had once known. She felt out of place here, but at the same time, she knew this was where she needed to be. "I think I'm ready," Mia said quietly, her hands resting in her lap. David looked up from the papers on his desk, his expression kind but curious. "Ready for what?" Mia took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I want to accept the inheritance, but I don't want to use it for myself. I want to use it to help others, people who are going through what I went through. I want to create something that makes a real difference." David smiled, a look of pride in his eyes. "Your father would be so proud of you, Mia. He always wanted you to make your own path, and this is exactly what he would have wanted." Mia's heart swelled with emotion. For so long she had been running from her father's legacy, afraid that accepting the money would mean losing herself. But now she realized that she could use the money to build a future that honored both her father's memory and her own journey. "I want to start a foundation," Mia continued, her voice growing stronger as she spoke. "A foundation that helps underprivileged students, kids who don't have the opportunities that people like Alex and I had. I want to give them the chance to succeed no matter where they come from." David nodded, his eyes filled with approval. "That's a wonderful idea. We can get started right away. I'll help you set up the legal framework and we'll find the right people to support you." Mia smiled, a sense of purpose settling over her. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was finally in control of her own future. As Mia moved forward with her plans for the foundation, Alex found himself more and more involved in her work. It had started with small things, helping her with logistics, brainstorming ideas for fundraising events. But soon Alex realized that he wanted to be a part of this in a deeper way. He had spent so long living in a bubble of privilege, unaware of the struggles faced by people like Mia. But now he wanted to use his position, his resources, to make a difference. One evening, after a particularly long planning session for the foundation's launch, Alex turned to Mia, his expression thoughtful. "I've been thinking," he began slowly. "Maybe I could help you with the foundation. I mean, really help. I have connections, resources. I could use them to support the work you're doing." Mia looked at him, surprised but touched by his offer. "You want to be involved?" Alex nodded, his voice steady. "Yeah, I do. I want to be a part of something meaningful. I've spent so much of my life focused on things that don't matter, money, status, all that. But this matters. Mia smiled, a warmth spreading through her chest. I'd love to have you on board, Alex. We could really make a difference together. And so, Alex became a key part of the foundation, using his connections and resources to help Mia expand the outreach programs and build a network of support for underprivileged students. Together, they began to create something bigger than either of them had imagined, a legacy that would impact generations to come. Months later, the launch of the Michael Rivers Foundation arrived. David Thompson hosted a grand gala at the Thompson estate to celebrate the occasion, inviting some of the most influential people in the city. But unlike the lavish parties Alex had once known, this event felt different. It wasn't about wealth or status. It was about something deeper, something meaningful. Mia stood at the edge of the grand ballroom, watching as guests mingled and admired the work she and Alex had done. Her heart swelled with pride, not for wealth or attention, but for the impact she knew the foundation would have. This was her father's legacy, but it was also hers, a reflection of her journey, her strength, and her determination to make a difference in the world. Alex joined her, standing quietly by her side. He had changed so much over the past few months, and now, standing beside Mia, he felt more at peace with himself than he ever had before. "You did it," Alex said softly, his voice filled with admiration. "This is all because of you." Mia shook her head, smiling at him. "We did it. I couldn't have done this without you." They stood together in comfortable silence, the weight of the past finally lifting as they both realized how far they had come. They had both made mistakes, both hurt each other in ways that couldn't be undone. But they had also learned, grown, and become better because of it. As the night wore on and the guests began to leave, Mia and Alex slipped outside into the garden, seeking a quiet moment away from the noise and excitement of the gala. The night air was cool, and the stars above twinkled brightly against the dark sky. They sat together on a stone bench, the same bench where they had shared so many difficult conversations in the past. But now the tension is gone, replaced by a sense of peace and mutual respect. "I never thought we'd end up here," Mia said softly, her gaze fixed on the stars above. Alex smiled, his voice gentle. "Neither did I." They sat in silence for a while, both reflecting on the journey they had been on, the mistakes, the growth, the forgiveness. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. "You know," Alex said after a while, "I used to think that money and status were the most important things in life. I thought that having it all meant being successful." Mia looked at him curious. "And now?" Alex smiled, a warmth in his eyes. "Now I realize that real success is about the connections you make with people. It's about how you treat others, how you give back. That's what really matters." Mia's heart swelled with emotion. For so long, she had been afraid that stepping into her father's legacy would mean losing herself. But now, sitting beside Alex, she realized that she could embrace her past while still forging her own path. "I think we've both learned a lot," Mia said quietly, her voice filled with gratitude. Alex nodded, his expression soft. "Yeah, we have." For the first time in both their lives, they felt truly at peace, not because they had everything they wanted, but because they had finally found what really mattered. The Michael Rivers Foundation grew rapidly over the next few years, expanding its reach to support underprivileged students across the country. Mia continued to lead the foundation with the same humility and dedication that had guided her throughout her life, while Alex became a passionate advocate for social change, using his platform to challenge the systems of privilege he had once benefited from. David Thompson, proud of both Mia and Alex, watched as they built something truly remarkable, something that honored the legacy of both the Rivers and Thompson families. He had once feared that he had failed his friend Michael, but now, seeing Mia and Alex working together, he knew that Michael's dream had been fulfilled. For Mia and Alex, life was no longer about status or power. It was about making a difference, about using what they had to lift others up. They had learned that true wealth wasn't measured in money or possessions. It was measured in kindness, empathy, and the impact you leave on the world. And for the first time in both of their lives, they felt truly rich. It had been just over a year since the Michael Rivers Foundation had officially launched, and in that short time it had already made a tangible difference in countless lives. The foundation's primary mission was to provide scholarships, mentorship programs, and resources to underprivileged students who, like Mia once did, needed an opportunity to escape the cycle of poverty and build a future. Mia stood at the front of the foundation's new headquarters, a modest yet elegant office located in the heart of the city. It wasn't as grand as the buildings owned by her father's old company, but it was perfect for what they were trying to accomplish. The office hummed with energy, staff and volunteers working together on new initiatives, students dropping by for tutoring sessions, and board members discussing plans for the future. Mia walked down the hallway, pausing to smile at the group of high school students gathered in one of the mentoring rooms. She had come to know some of them personally over the past year, and it filled her with pride to see them thriving, gaining the support and opportunities she had once been denied. Outside the conference room, she saw Alex, speaking animatedly with one of the foundation's newest sponsors. He had grown into his role at the foundation, using his family's connections to build partnerships with organizations that could help expand their reach. He looked so different from the boy she had met at Cedar Ridge. The arrogance that had once defined him was gone, replaced by a quiet confidence and genuine passion for the work they were doing. As Mia approached, Alex turned to her, his eyes lighting up. "We just secured another round of funding for the college prep program," he said, his voice filled with excitement. "That means even more students will be able to get the support they need to apply to schools they never thought they could." Mia smiled warmly. "That's amazing, Alex. This is exactly what we dreamed of when we started." Alex nodded, his gaze softening as he looked at her. "None of this would have happened without you, Mia. You're the heart of this foundation." Mia blushed slightly, though she shook her head. "It's all of us, Alex. We're doing this together." That evening, after the day's work had wound down, Mia and Alex found themselves back at the foundation's office, the rest of the staff having gone home. The two of them sat in the small courtyard behind the building, the sound of the city's hustle and bustle providing a soothing backdrop to the quiet moment they were sharing. Mia glanced up at the stars, her thoughts drifting back to the girl she had been with just a few years ago, alone, scared, unsure of her future. It seemed like a lifetime ago now, but in many ways those experiences had shaped her into the person she was today. "I never thought I'd be here," Mia admitted softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "There were so many nights when I didn't know how I'd make it to the next day. And now, it's almost hard to believe that we've built all of this." Alex nodded, his own expression thoughtful. "You've been through so much, Mia. But look at what you've accomplished. You didn't just survive, you're thriving. And because of you, so many other people will get the chance to do the same." Mia smiled, a sense of peace settling over her. For so long she had carried the weight of her past like a burden. But now she could see it for what it truly was, a testament to her strength, her resilience, and her determination to create a better future. "What about you?" Mia asked, turning to Alex. "How do you feel about everything? Do you ever miss the old life?" Alex laughed softly, shaking his head. Not at all. Honestly, I've never been happier. The life I had before, it wasn't real. It was built on things that didn't matter. Money, status, power. But now I feel like I'm finally doing something meaningful, something that makes a difference. Mia's heart swelled with pride. She had seen firsthand how much Alex had changed over the past year, how deeply he had committed himself to helping others and using his privilege for good. He was no longer the boy who had once belittled her. He was someone she respected, someone she could rely on, and someone she was proud to call her partner on this journey. As the months turned into years, the Michael Rivers Foundation continued to grow, touching the lives of more students, families, and communities. Mia and Alex became known not just for their work at the foundation, but for their advocacy for social change. They spoke at schools, attended conferences, and used their platform to challenge the systems of inequality that had once separated them. David Thompson, too, played an integral role in supporting the foundation's growth. Though he had once feared that his legacy would be overshadowed by his own mistakes, he now found solace in knowing that his son and Mia had carried on the work that mattered most, building a better world for those who needed it most. As for Mia, she had fully embraced her father's legacy, but in her own way. She had taken the wealth that had once felt like a burden and turned it into a tool for empowerment. And in doing so, she had honored both her father's memory and the woman she had become. Years later, as the foundation celebrated its 5th anniversary, a new event was held at Cedar Ridge Academy, where it had all begun. The gala, hosted by both Mia and Alex, was filled with teachers, students, donors, and beneficiaries of the foundation's programs. The school, once a place of division and judgment for Mia, now stood as a symbol of unity and progress. Mia stood on the stage that evening, looking out at the sea of faces. Her heart swelled with emotion as she realized just how far she had come, not just in terms of her success, but in terms of her healing. She was no longer the girl who felt invisible, no longer the girl who had to fight for every scrap of dignity. She had found her place in the world, and it was a place she had built with her own hands. As she began her speech, Alex stood by her side, his hand resting lightly on her back. The two of them had been through so much together, and now they are celebrating the fruits of their labor. "When I first walked through the doors of Cedar Ridge," Mia said, her voice filled with emotion, "I never imagined that one day I'd be standing here celebrating something as incredible as this foundation, but life has a way of surprising us, of showing us that even in our darkest moments, there's always a chance to find light." She paused, glancing at Alex, who smiled warmly at her. "This foundation is about more than just scholarships and programs. It's about hope. It's about giving people the chance to believe in themselves, to know that no matter where they come from, they are worthy of success, worthy of love, and worthy of opportunity." The crowd erupted into applause, but Mia barely heard it. She was too focused on the feeling of peace that had settled in her heart. She had finally found her place in the world, and it was one built on love, compassion, and the belief that everyone deserved a chance to shine. That night, as Mia and Alex stood together outside the school, the stars twinkling above them like they had so many times before, they both felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the journey they had taken. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Mia said softly, her voice filled with wonder. Alex smiled, his hand slipping into hers. "Yeah, we have." They stood in silence for a moment, both of them reflecting on everything that had brought them to this point. The pain, the mistakes, the growth, it had all led them here, to a place where they could make a real difference in the world. And as they looked toward the future, they knew that this was only the beginning. Together they had built something beautiful. Together they would continue to fight for a world where everyone had the chance to succeed. Together, They had found true wealth, the kind that couldn't be measured in dollars or possessions, but in the lives they had touched, the hearts they had healed, and the love they had shared. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more like it, make sure to subscribe. Hit the subscribe button and join us for more stories of transformation, redemption, and hope. Your support helps keep these stories coming, so thank you.